Sometimes the lines between fantasy and reality cross, they blur. I don't like to keep you guys waiting. So let me crank this bus up and let's get this ride started. What it do, peeps? I'm the Beat Chef. Welcome to the ride. Hit that like, that share, that subscribe button. Hit that hype button to hype the video up. Hit that bell to get notified when I drop my next video. To my new subscribers, thank you for watching. I hope you enjoy the show and hope you get something from the content. To my day ones, my ride or dies, thank you for helping me build this platform and continue this WNBA conversation. Earth, Wind, and Fire series is still continuing. And in the 70s, Earth, Wind, and Fire made a phenomenal song called Fantasy. Great song. And it is the theme of today's show. So with that being said, let us begin with the way the league markets their players. Understand, I told you about the ABL, and I did that for a reason, because you had to see the beginning. But if you missed the part about David Stern, see, David Stern was very sneaky. David Stern got Leslie, Lobo, and Swoops to be the marketing arm for the WNBA and basketball in general. Good move, especially when you start the league with women. But the only thing was he kept that same business model going. I know many of you haven't watched the WNBA for a long time, but you'll start noticing the similar threads from the past going into the present. And it'll also tell you a little bit about the future. So at any point in time, there will always be three women that carry this league. No woman will ever carry this league alone. That is by design. I had an interesting conversation in the comments with a viewer that were talking about the same thing. And I agreed wholeheartedly with that person. Yes, you can't market the league around one player. We all know one player moves the needle. Many of us believe that, but you can't market the entire league off of one player. So David Stern, in creating a reality, gives the players a fantasy. So you got the original three, and they carried the league for many years. And like I said, Rebecca Lobo's career was cut short. Cheryl Swoops still had a longer career. But Lisa Leslie was that one. She was the one that had the looks, and she was the one that had the basketball skills. And during this same time frame, you know, all these movies, Love and Basketball, everything starts coming out about basketball. But Lisa Leslie is one of the main torch carriers of this league. And then a young girl came to the league with phenomenal talent from a school called UConn, and her name was Diana Taurasi. See, that's where the UConn seat will always be. Note that in the WNBA, there's 3 seats. UConn presides over one of them and will always preside over one of them at any given time point in their history. So Diana Taurasi's got a seat. See, Diana Taurasi was Caitlin Clark before Caitlin Clark. While still flashy with the passes, Caitlin Clark's a superb, exceptional passer. Diana Taurasi was equally a good passer. But Diana Taurasi could score that ball and play like no woman you've ever seen up until Caitlin Clark. She is Caitlin Clark before Caitlin Clark. And she was a star. Played for one team. You know she's a star because she's one of the few that just decided to say, you know what, I'm going to take a year off from playing in the W. I'm going to go play in Russia. They're paying me $1.5 million. And then she returned the next year to her regular salary and benefits. One thing about David Stern that he did, the fantasy players, the 3, one, if not all of them, will always have a shoe contract. That's by design. You see, when Cheryl Swoops was in the big 3, she had the Air Swoops When Dawn Staley came and she was marketed as one of the top players in the big three, she had a shoe contract. Diana Taurasi has been a wearer of the shoes, the Nikes. It's always one that will get that deal. See, that was part of the thing. See, you sell the fantasy that these players have a seat at the table, but in reality, they're just an employee, and that's just a perk, a benefit. You get to sit upon the mantle, be lauded, be marketed as one of the top players, the face of the league, but meanwhile, you yield no power in the league. That's the catch. That's the thread between the fantasy and the reality. So you go at any point in the WNBA's history when Diana came. It was always Diana Taurasi and another player, such as Maya Moore. Now you got two Connecticut people on the mantle. And then you get a Elena Delle Donne, you get a Tamika Catchings that comes into the league. You get a Brittany Griner that comes into the league. And at any given time, there was interchangeable players that would get put in and put out as the faces of the league, but Diana Taurasi always remained constant. So you fast forward a couple years later, there's a youngster that's coming in as Lisa Leslie's about to pass the torch, and that's Candace Parker. But see, Candace is different. Candace has had an allegiance to Adidas for way back, but she still sits on the mantle. She still sits upon the greats, the marketable players, the most liked players, and she's one of the best players in the WNBA's history. So you got Candace Parker, now you got Diana Taurasi, and you start filtering in other players. That's where your Elena Delle Donnes, your Maya Moores, your Breanna Stewarts, your Jewel Lloyds, they all come in. They all come in. They sit on that seat. Well, as time went on, Candace Parker started getting old, and a young A'ja Wilson emerged. And, Candace Parker said out of her own mouth, A'ja was ready to take the torch and run the league. And that's what A'ja did. She carried the torch, and she got her seat. Now it's an older Diana Taurasi, but you still got an accomplished UConn person on that three-headed committee in Breanna Stewart. So when 2024 comes and Caitlin Clark's about to come to the league, Diana Taurasi issues a stern warning to Caitlin Clark. And I'm still, for the record, I still don't mind what she said, because it plays into what I'm saying now. See, she said, reality is coming. See, that was a signal to the rest of the league. See, Diana was on her way out. Caitlin was on her way in. Caitlin was going to get one of those spots by hell or high water. And that she did. A'ja's up there. Caitlin's up there. But Diana's fading off. Her seat's going to get taken. Breanna is the last line for this year to hold the mantle. Breanna goes out. She wins a title, Caitlin Clark's first year. Now it's A'ja, Caitlin, and Breanna. At the beginning of the 2025 season, I did a rankings system. And I said it didn't have to do all with basketball, but it was some other things entailed. On my rankings, I put A'ja Wilson, Caitlin Clark, and Nafisa Collier as the top three players. And I called it the presidential suite. The suite below that was the penthouse. The penthouse had Jonquel Jones, Sabrina Ionescu, Breanna Stewart, who had fallen in the rankings because of one thing: unrivaled. See, in unrivaled, the thing they don't talk about is the injuries. Breanna Stewart hurt her knee in the unrivaled games, and she had to have surgery. They knew that coming into the season. and they let it slide. They didn't really give it much fanfare. So who had benefited from Unrivaled and benefited from battling Breonna Stewart in a tough championship series was Nafisa Collier. Nafisa Collier owned Unrivaled season 1. Showed that she was purely the best player and a talented player. And it translated from the W to Unrivaled. And so I put her at the top. And I used to have their cards in the back. I would have those 3 ladies at the very top and everybody else below. The other 2 categories were Studio, which was the level 3. That's where I had Angel Reese. And then the basement. Basement, just regular players that fill out a roster. Not much stars there. The majority of the league is basement. But you still got those big 3 to market. So the season starts, and Fee is doing her thing. She's proven that, damn, them rankings were right. First 2 months, she's the player of the month for May and June. But in June, some things happened. June, she gets awarded the Slam magazine cover for the second time. The first time, she was on there with her child. This time, she was on there alone. And I said, yep, they have selected Fee to be in the upper echelons of the players that are going to market this league going forward. And then she got the shoes, because I told you, David Stern has already sold this fantasy. She got awarded a contract with Jordan Brand. Jordan Brand is a subsidiary of Nike. So everything's going good until July. July was the first in a many of series of traps that the ownership, the owners, the league set for the players. The players still haven't seen most of the traps. I'm going to talk about those on the next video, but this first trap was the meeting with the league. Now, mind you, when they came out of this meeting, they were angry, pissed off. Courtney Williams was confused. And I knew then, had y'all been bargaining the entire time, meeting them face to face wouldn't have been no different than a Zoom call. So y'all haven't been bargaining. Y'all been demanding. Y'all are bitter. I get it. But the league did something even more calculated after that. They used Caitlin Clark to still sell the league to people. Remember, there got to be 3 people on them seats. So they use Caitlin Clark until they can't. At the same time they're using Caitlin Clark, Fee gets hurt. So now the Connecticut seat is empty. And if you remember in August, you remember who they elevated. A one Paige Beckers. Paige Beckers went on to score 40 points. I believe it was against the Sparks. And then she became untouchable. You couldn't touch Paige Beckers, if you recall. You remember Sophie Cunningham speaking out about this twice and got fined heavily twice and never brought it up again. Because now the youngest Husky is now being placed in one of those seats. By this time, in the August rolling around, people are getting dejected. They realize Caitlin Clark's not going to play. And they finally make an announcement that she's done for the season. This was the second trap. Players never saw it. See, during this whole time Caitlin Clark wasn't playing, they had a chance to show their talent. Instead, you got Asia body slamming Kayla McBride. You got NECA slamming a Dallas Wings player and pointing at her. You got a lot of bad basketball fights going on with the Phoenix Mercury, Dallas Wings. Everywhere you looked, these players, instead of showing their best, they showed the worst. And as each incident went on, the bitterness began to grow. If you remember this, you remember in the playoffs, things got a little contentious a lot of times, a lot of games. You saw where Cheryl Reeve exploded, got tossed out of a playoff game, and got suspended for the next game because her star player, Nafisa Collier, was injured. And then Fee not being able to control her emotions, and that St. Louis center finally came out. I know a lot of people from the Lou, and the women I know from the Lou, they don't play. So Fee goes on that tirade in her exit interview and blasts Kathy Engelbert. Now, women are the more emotional of the other genders. But when Kathy came back with logic and a little emotion. And she said how disappointed she was in Fee mischaracterizing their conversation. But Kathy laid a trap for the ages. I'm going to talk about that trap on the next video. But this video, I just wanted to focus on the players and the marketing. See, Caitlin Clark was hurt. Had Caitlin Clark played and tried to get her team a championship and go to the playoffs, she would have tore that groin. You know who pulled her out of league play? Was that team, that company we found out is a major sponsor in the WNBA, Nike. And for good reason. See, on Caitlin Clark's bucket list is to make it to the league. She's checked that off. She wants to be an Olympian. If Caitlin Clark gets injured at the end of the season, she's going to have surgery. That's going to be about a 2-month rehab. And then she comes back and she can't play in December and try out for the U.S. Olympic team. That means her window is now it's going to be a 5 to 10 year window before she can even sniff a playoff. I mean, a spot on that roster, because they'll go with who they have. She needed to make that trial. Nike needed her to make that trial. They missed the boat in 24. They were not going to miss the boat in 28. She had to be in those trials, those tryouts. That's the reason why. And for obvious reasons. Future. And then it also gave a league a chance to sit there and say, hey, we've taken the biggest chip off the board. Show the world what you got. The players couldn't, because they've never cared about fans, regardless of what the Players Association says. And so they went on and showed their butts at each stop they could. 3 players must always be at the top to market this league. There will always be 3. You fast forward to A'ja Wilson. A'ja Wilson accomplished MVPs, won a title, Times Athlete of the Year, and yet she's bitter. Well, just last night, her mentor and coach, Dawn Staley, had a good game against Texas. Watched the entire game. It's a good game. Bad turnovers on both sides. A lot of turnovers. But it came down to the end. Of course, South Carolina won by 3. But everybody on Dawn Staley's staff was wearing these shirts. Holly Rowe mentioned these shirts in the broadcast. My favorite coach is, and that was in white, and then in red it was a woman, and on the side of the shirt it had Dawn Staley's picture. When Dawn Staley's winning, she's still miserable. A'ja Wilson has tapped into what her coach has taught her, And that's why I wanted to give you guys the ABL angle from the past, because it still lives on. Dawn Staley is an ABL disciple. She passes negative energy to a lot of her players. A'ja Wilson is Dawn Staley in the present, hooping, get all the accolades, get the signature shoe, and at each point, somebody else is thwarting her greatness. And in reality, it's her. The fantasy and the reality blended together. The reality is she got everything anybody would want as a player. All the lower players, the lower ranked players would love to be in A'ja's situation. A'ja not happy with A'ja. That's the reality. She live in a fantasy world that everybody's against her and that she doesn't get the shine that she deserves. The fantasy. Earth, wind, and fire. And her coach has the same fantasy. Mind you, next season, South Carolina becomes a Nike school again. 10-year deal because of Dawn Staley's relationship that she got with Nike through the WNBA and being one of those three. See, Dawn was one of those three. She took the fantasy, and the reality is she benefited from it. She's had a 30-plus year relationship with Nike. But let her tell it, she a victim at every stop. That's the marketing of the WNBA. And that's the marketing that David Stern set forth. And you think about it from this angle, every one of these players, as great as they are, Elena Delle Donne, Sabrina Ionescu, there's a ton of players that have had them shoes. A ton of them. A ton of players that have had those shoes. A lot of them. Jonquel Jones, where's Kevin Durant's. The list goes on. It truly is a Nike league. But the illusion is that you get them shoes, you get lauded and paraded around like you're the best and the best in the league. But David Stern made the reality clear for the past, present, and the future. You will never have a seat at the table. You will own nothing. You can get all the perks, all the bells and whistles, and they play to all these ladies' egos. But you will never get power. You will never get a seat at the table. That is a fantasy. Earth, wind, and fire. Still running the bus. Leave your comments below. Like, share, and subscribe. Oh, name your 3 players that are the presidential that are in the presidential suite that sit in those seats. Because remember, it always got to be 3. Always. When Diana stepped down, she was the longest tenured person that held a seat. When she left, there was a UConn person already sitting in place. So imagine, fee get dropped in 1 year, never to return. She ain't never getting that spot back. She's went on a bitter B tour since she got hurt. They are never going to put Fee Collier in a spot where she represents the W, ever. She's killed that. Never will get that seat back. But you give me your 3. Some of you might think it's Angel Reese and 2 others. It ain't one player. One player can move the needle. I'm just talking about from a marketing standpoint. The 3 players you think the league will use to market. Mine are simple. A'ja, Caitlin, Paige. As it's been written so eloquently. Those are my 3. Because Fee out. They're going to use Nafisa Collier as an example. My next video is all about the owners. They requested, I go pick them up. With that being said, I'm gonna let you guys go because they all over the country. I gotta go scoop up all these people and have some conversation so that I can have a conversation with you. So let me get off this and go pick up the owners. The next ride is the owners. And we still rocking earth, wind, and fire. Until next time, folks, peace.